Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner or regular shirt to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete. I'm currently driving in my car, so ignore some noises. So, yeah, let's have fun.
Hi, this is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet, associate professor at the Carrick Institute, and train people online, bunch of stuff. Still at home.
Yeah, still at home.
Yeah, new record.
Everyone, today we're going to spend a little time in reflection, and you can join us, of course. We're going to try to characterize our diets, and what I mean by that is, is there a macro focus? There's food group focus, like veg versus meat versus dairy or eggs. You get the idea. Even calorie and meal size, how has it changed over the years? Again, just characterizing the diet. First, though, we have a little bit of news.
Strength and muscle sport news.
Out of the gate, I want to just offer, because it's free, and this is highly unusual, but the American Society of Nutrition, their science meeting, their professional meeting, is June 1st through the 4th. If you go to meeting.nutrition.org, you can just soak up an enormous amount of posters and lectures and all the, nerdy science you could want when it comes to nutrition. Mike and I are often pushing this sort of thing for people, whether you're a lay person or you're a professional in some way. You really get some insight into what's coming down the pike in the next 5 years. So, yeah, please check that out. American Society of Nutrition. I told Michelle Crispino there, their education person, that I would mention it. And we have some posters there. We collaborated with Dr. Nelson on some HRV stuff. We looked at whether or not coffee is helping with carb handling in younger, more fit people. So we have a couple of abstracts and posters that are going to be there as well. So, yeah, free, meeting.nutrition.org. In other news, I thought I would bring this up or continue to bring it up, but we are going to try video in the not-too-distant future. That may shock a lot of you because we're an audio podcast, but we've talked about this a little bit behind the scenes. So I guess I'll just say look for it this summer on YouTube. We'll primarily do reviews and taste tests. Like I've got a can right now of that Caveman Coffee Nitro Brew in my hand. You guys have all tried that, but we're going to basically just run down different kinds of, from my perspective, mostly foods. Maybe a high fiber alternative to this, or a whey protein as a snack chip, stuff like that. And then we'll kind of rate it, like on a 5 or a 10 scale, that kind of stuff. So, and brief. The whole idea of these videos is they're going to be brief. They're probably going to be like 10 minutes. I might even put a few news things, like tangents that we talk about on the audio podcast. I might even do something like that. So, anyway. Okay. As far as the science news goes, I've got a few weird things about lab-grown everything, apparently. So this first one it's an update. This is from about 3 months ago. Cell-based meats approach scalability. Now, Mike and I said this was going to happen. When watching the guy from Memphis Meats at IFT in 2017. And here it comes by Sam Danley, Food Business News, I believe. Says there are signs cell-based meat may soon be a reality in the marketplace. Investments in cultured meat startups increased more than 120% between 2018 and 2019. Now, this is the kind of stuff I kept saying, if I had money, this is where I would be investing it. Several companies, including Blue Nalu, Future Meat Technologies, Finless Foods, Wild Type, and Aleph Farms, A-L-E-P-H, all raised more than $10 million last year, bringing the total amount raised by the cultured meat startups since 2015 to over $155 million. But here's where the story gets more interesting, and Mike and I will kind of smile. Then there was this breakthrough round of funding, and Memphis Meats secured $161 million. So that's more than all of the other companies together. Memphis Meats are on it, and Mike and I know firsthand that guy. He's a characterful guy, you know, the colorful little bow tie, and he's very clever. He's got answers, right? When people attack him, he's got answers.
He was on our podcast, right? I think we had him on, didn't we?
Oh,
I'm pretty sure we did.
Okay, well, yeah. After all this time, it's a blur. So yeah, Berkeley-based Memphis Meats. It says, let's see. This could signal potential partnerships basically with the big boys, which include Cargill and Tyson Foods, said Nate Crosser, business analyst at Good Food Institute, the GFI. More than a dozen types of meat have entered this space since 2013, including pork, chicken, beef, and duck. I believe at IFT, Mike, we were talking about fish as well. Weren't they also doing fish? Or was that too hard for them?
They were, fish they said was quite a bit behind, but the three they had done were all genetically that different. I guess if you think about it, I guess I didn't realize ducks were that different, but then when you stop and think about it, you go, oh, yeah, I guess that does make sense.
Yeah.
I always think ducks and chickens are closer together than what they are, but they're actually pretty significantly different from a genetic standpoint. So, yeah.
That's interesting, yeah. Yeah, you just think poultry, I don't know, bird meat.
Bird, yeah.
It says the potential of cell-based or cultured meat has never been in doubt, said Andy Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E, food correspondent at Global Data. Processed meats have been notoriously expensive, though. First cultured hamburger patty, created in 2013, cost over $278,000 to make a burger. It says fast forward to 2019, and that number is down to around $100. Mike, I believe we heard, and I'd have to go back and listen to ourselves about this, but by 2021, they said it'd be approaching parity with expensive regular meats, if I remember right.
Yeah, and at that time, I believe they were predicting 2020. They wanted it in high-end restaurants. And their prediction was because they can customize the amount of collagen and cross-linking and all this kind of stuff that they were positioning it as not just lab-grown meat, but superior to other forms of meat. And we're trying to target high-end restaurants first, I believe. Which kind of makes sense. If you can show your product is superior, you can get it in a place that has a high price point. From a marketing standpoint, that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember them walking a fine line between superior and you can't say, if you say it's too superior, then it doesn't look like meat and you can't define it as meat. Yeah.
Yep.
It says hybrid products combining plant-based proteins with the cultured fats, it says, could launch as early as 2021, followed by 100% cultured meat products in 2022. So that's, again,
cutting it with cheap protein.
Yeah, I mean, and then, of course, there's the definition thing, right, of course. And we're already alluding to it, but as far as government getting the green light and whatnot, it says in 2018, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the FDA agreed to create a joint regulatory framework to sort of oversee cell-based meat products. Additional guidance was anticipated in 2019, but it never came. And I'm wondering if this isn't pushback from, like, the cattle growers and that kind of thing. Cattle
Association.
Yeah, they are not fans of this, as you might guess. For me, it's almost inevitable. It's like vertical farming. You keep hearing more and more. Elon Musk's brother, I guess, is behind that. You know, I mean, if you can grow plants with the exact perfect concoction of nutrient broth and wavelength of light and everything else, every freaking plant is a prize winner at the local fair, you know. And I see this in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, this is going to be something that supplements regular agriculture, right? But it's disruptive enough and it's profitable enough, at least the vertical farming of plants, that it's going to do something.
Yeah.
One more here. This is, I hadn't heard of this. This is from friend of the show, Danielle, New York Times. This is actually from last summer, so this is probably about 10 months old, but I just got it, so we're talking about it just now. Got Impossible Milk, the quest for lab-made dairy. So meat's one thing. Also, they're trying their hand at dairy. This is by Knvul, Knvul. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Chic. It says alternatives to conventional cow's milk have proliferated, of course. I mean, the plant-based ones are everywhere, right? There's soy milk, almond milk, oat milk, rice milk, hemp milk, coconut milk, cashew milk, pea milk. So you get the idea. Of course, these are made by breaking down the plants and reconstituting them with water, essentially. Some of them do a better job than others, I would argue. But according to Inja Radman, a molecular biologist, it says vegan cheese is just terrible, she said. As scientists, we know why this doesn't work. It doesn't have the crucial dairy proteins, and listeners know we're talking about casein and whey. Right, and a lot of this work with the cheese, remember, dairy's not just a glass of milk, of course. With the cheese stuff, casein is king. I mean, casein's most of the protein in your milk, too. But it says microbes such as yeast are given genetic instructions to produce the dairy proteins. So, listeners, if you're not familiar, this is how they've been making insulin forever. You know, it's not like just bovine or porcine insulin or whatever these days. They actually, you know, get recombinant DNA technology and they make it. So they're doing that with casein, apparently. It says the microbes are then cultivated in mass, and of course then you can get mass amounts of something like casein. Radman said the company had conducted double-blind taste tests to see people could tell the difference between the proof-of-concept cheese and the store-bought mozzarella, and the results were very positive. I don't know what that means. There's no data behind this. Proponents of lab-made milk see the product appealing to dairy lovers broadly while satisfying concerns about animal welfare and environmental sustainability, the kinds of things like, you know, the carbon emissions from cows and all that kind of stuff. Sales of plant-based milks jumped 6% last year and now make up 13% of the entire milk market, so they're thinking, of course, this has its place. And again, they're really trying to bring up the term impossible burger a lot in this news bit because, you know, that's something that's recognizable and it's sort of proof of concept that, you know, this non-meat meats can be popular with the Gen Pop. It says what helped the Impossible Burger was their lab-made heme, which had a tremendous impact on the appearance of the burger. I read elsewhere that the heme is part of what gives it its savory flavor, you know, that kind of thing. And if people, a lot of you guys are familiar, of course, heme is in red blood cells, oxygen transport in the body, and all that kind of stuff. But here we're talking about the culinary aspects of it. So, yeah, a tremendous appearance on the burger, said Sam Alkane, a food scientist at Cornell. And then, of course, he speculates about consumers, whether they'll notice a difference with the dairy products and the casein. You know, again, tricking the yeast or the microbes to make casein. The Food and Drug Administration has a legal standard for what can be called ice cream, for example. And this is what we were saying with meats, too, right? You can't say it's too much better because now it's different. Anyway, the Food and Drug Administration says ice cream, for example, has to be 10% milk, fat, or cream from a cow. And, of course, that's not what a lot of these lab people are really happy about, right, whether it's meats or the dairy. So for right now, as I'm reading this, it looks like it has to be labeled a frozen dairy dessert. And for most of us, I think, that listen to this show, if you're health conscious at all or performance aware, whenever I hear frozen dairy dessert, that's like hearing, you know, fruit beverage. right? Just like red flag.
Real fruit.
Right, exactly. Dairy farmers are also likely to push back. And again, this is what we were saying about the ranchers, right, and the cattle growers against the meats. But dairy farmers are likely to push back against this lab-grown casein and dairy products, lobbying for stronger laws governing the labeling of lab-made products. So, anyway, kind of thematic news bit for everybody today about they're growing this stuff in the lab. I don't know. What I think is interesting is it's essentially the same thing, right? The cell-cultured meat or trick the microbes to make the casein. It's actually casein, right? So it's going to have the baking and cooking and mouthfeel characteristics of actual casein. So it's not, to me, it's sort of a step better in nutrients in some ways, like, protein quality and that kind of stuff compared to plant stuff.
Well, in theory, you could customize it to almost whatever you want, right? Probably within some parameters I don't know anything about, but it kind of gives you a way to go in and tinker with maybe certain amino acids, or maybe you want to make a high casein derivative, and you only need 20 grams to maximize muscle protein synthesis, or who knows?
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, it's true. I think they're going to back away because the FDA and the USDA are like watching, and so they're not going to want to say, like leucine spiked casein, woohoo, everybody,
That's not going to happen right away. But once it's approved, I can guarantee they're going to think about how can we change it and still fall within the guidelines.
Well, that would interest me more, right? It's like best of both worlds. Yes, please. Yeah. Phil, you have goats. Do you drink goat milk and stuff like that, or are other kinds of milk, or is it all cow all the time?
No, we drink cow.
Yeah.
Our goats they use their milk on their babies. So.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and we'll go to break a little bit early here. When we come back, we're gonna talk about characterizing our diets. And again, listeners, you can kind of reflect on yourself and think about, how would you describe your diet? Why do you eat the way you do? So we'll be back.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. You know who this is. So I'm here to tell you about Dr. Mike T. Nelson's new book, Why You Should Eat Keto. I don't do it because, look at me, come on, I'm fabulous and I'm fantastic. Anyway, you should text the Keto ebook, all in one word, to 44222 to receive your free copy. Do it now!
Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. IronRadio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, IronRadio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or IronRadio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everybody, we're back. We're going to talk about food this time after a couple of weeks of talking about strength coaching and COVID all the time. Characterizing the diet. Now, there's different ways to do this, and I'll just kind of spell this out to begin with here. But these are some things that you can think about. One would be, what's your macro focus? Do you have one? For me, I would argue probably protein. But you know, Mike likes flexibility and fuel sources and all that kind of stuff. So macro focus is probably a big one. Another might be plant-based versus meat versus egg and dairy. Another one might be calories and meal size, because that's varied for me wildly over the years. Probably the most for Phil. I mean, I can't imagine the differences in just what's on his plate.
True.
Supplements, snacking, seasonal ins and outs, right? All these things are realities. So let's start with that, Phil. How would you characterize your diet, just in general?
Now, in general?
Yeah, now.
I just try to eat, from doing it so long, I know what's good. I know what I should eat. And that's what I try and do like 90% of the time right now when I'm away from a meat. So it's just eat good food. I don't have any restrictions on carbs. I don't have any restrictions on protein, fats. I just try and keep it to good whole foods most of the time.
Okay.
That's basically
So non-processed is what you're saying, really.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, like I said, 90%, then I'll have my 10% where you get whatever I want. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Just treats and fun, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you've done that for a long time, I think. Eat what's on the plan and plenty of it, and then...
And you'll be fine.
Drift into bad boy territory a little, but by then you're pretty full.
And like now I'm down close to 40 pounds from where I was at the meet. So.
Oh man.
Oh wow.
Just from eating normal. Everybody's like, "What are you doing?" Nothing. That's the point.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not trying to cram my pie hole. So.
Yep.
And summer rolls around, and it changes. That gets into another part of this seasonally and stuff like that. So.
Right, yeah. Like, late spring, I start buying a bunch of berries, and I freeze big batches of them so I can have them all year. Stuff that just comes around, I guess,
Yep.
How about you, Mike, as far as characteristics? I don't know, macro ratios or source, plant versus animal, whatever.
I'd say in general, I just try to focus on proteins, probably the main thing. Because usually that's a rate limiter in terms of prep and having it cooked and things like that. And right now I'm trying to get a little bit leaner, so I'm trying to eat more protein, and then played around with a little bit more of an extended fast, but I started doing that more frequently, and it just feels like muscle recovery isn't very good, and I realized that my protein had dropped off quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So I'll probably bump that back up again in like higher portions per meal. So 30, 40, 50 grams per meal. But I also drop meals per day to around 3. In the past, I've done 4 or 5. But I just found that if I kind of push my fast out a little bit in the morning, I was going to get some work done, do some aerobic stuff. And then just schedule-wise, I can get stuff done before I have to eat. And then if I eat 3 meals after that, that tends to work pretty good. But I realized the 3 meals I was having were probably 30-ish grams of protein, and that definitely wasn't enough. So I bumped that up to around 50-ish now, and then this past week I just added more calories and more food because I felt just beat up.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just, looking at performance, and I tend to get a little bit too aggressive. I'm like, I'll be fine for a couple of days, and calories are like super low, and you do all right, and then you like, oh, like 2 or 3 days later, you're like, oh wow, everything sucks. Performance is horrible. I'm an idiot. That's why I was, because you think you can get away with it for a couple of days, and then you realize you kind of pay the price with it. So yeah, going back to a little bit more higher protein per meal. Probably still try 3 to 4 meals, and see how that goes.
Yeah, it's a good point about just being mindful, making up and down tweaks depending on how you feel, your performance, your body fat. It's not like it's got to be a fixed thing for the next 5 months necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest mistake people made too, and even with clients I see, is that they get it in their head that they have to hit XYZ macros every day no matter what, and they just ignore like all the feedback from their body. It's like, how hungry are you? What's your stress like? What's your HRV? How is your performance in the gym? How is your sleep? And yeah, I get it. At some point, if you're, trying to get super, super lean, some of that stuff is going to drop off. But you should at least be aware of it then. And if you're just starting out, especially if you're trying to get leaner and you're hungry all the time, your performance is dropping, your sleep is disrupted. Yeah. The next 12 or 16 weeks or whatever you plan to do at that amount, you probably want to make a small tweak now and not have it be just a disaster.
Yeah. I think I'm similar with the protein focus. I mean, if there's any one thing I'm going to loosely count, not gram for gram, but it's probably protein, because if you're filling up on relatively lean protein foods, it's sort of auto-correcting for everything else, and it's just so simple. I do purposely try to eat some plant-based stuff. I remember Stu Phillips once told me that basically one night a week his family would have meatless stuff, soy, other plant proteins, whatever. And to me, that really emphasizes, the homeostatic control of the body. You're not going to have any kind of major physique changes because you don't eat meat one day of the week or something like that, that kind of stuff, especially if you eat a big variety of different plant foods. So I try to get a lot of stuff. Like when I snack, I have bean chips. I'm always trying to do something that's, not just garbage kind of thing. Or, a handful of nuts, even if it's caramelized or something. It's something that's actually got some phytochemical value. That's kind of where I'm at mostly these days. Like, not that different from Phil. I mean, definitely 2 steps further away from the farm than Phil probably, but beans, veg, I'll eat 2 chicken breasts at a time. Is that more than my body can use? Yeah, but if I'm hungry, bring it. I don't know. That kind of thing. Calorie-wise, I'm probably only eating about 3,500 calories a day. I mean, there was a time when I was eating 50% more than that. But again, it's like, Mike, you're talking about like almost more acute changes up and down week to week or month to month, but there's also like career stage. And I would look like a beanbag chair at my age if I just wigged out on 4,500, 5,000 calories a day like I did once upon a time. So,
I would say maintenance for someone of your size, 3,500 that's a good amount. I mean, I chronically see people coming in to start coaching that are at like, guys 22, 2,000. I'm like, oh my God.
It's a good point.
You're starting? Oh, boy.
Yeah, and because I've had students tell me that when they do their nutrition projects in my classes, they're like, I'm weight stable. I'm like, you're eating 1,800 calories a day, bro.
Oh.
No. So to me, it's like you need like metabolic rehab.
Yeah.
Because you should not be weight stable on sub 2,000 calories a day as a grown ass man. To put it
especially if that's where you plan on hanging out forever too. It's like, I get it if you're trying to cut and your body's not really responding and it's a temporary thing. I get it, but yeah, when they tell me like, oh, this is where I hang out like all the time.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Right. No, yeah. If you're coming off a 20-week diet and you're depressed down that low, I've been there. But that, yeah, you're right. Then you have a solid reason.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, I'm always like this. I'm like, no, that's not okay, man. 2,100 calories a day. You're a college male. That's not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can happen. It's remarkable how that happens because most people would like, they plug and chug their stuff into like one of these nutrient analyzers, and they're like, well, it's telling me a number that's too high, 3,000. That's really high. I'm like, that's college male standard, man. So, I'm sorry that your metabolism is that slow, and let's talk about why that might be. Wake up those muscles or something.
And as you know, a lot of people just crazily underreport stuff too. And if you're only doing a 2 or 3 day snapshot, it's not even a week. And there's all sorts of hiccups to that for listeners who are listening in too. Because I've run into that where someone's like, oh, I'm just not eating anything at all. And then you start having them log it long enough, and all of a sudden you see like a couple days that were just like astronomically high. I'm like, oh, okay. So
yeah,
this is making a little bit more sense. You weren't eating as a grown male 1,400 calories every day and not losing weight. Okay.
Yeah, right. The other thing too is when people use, just kind of tip here, they oftentimes those analyzers, they want you to put in your activity level. And routinely I have students and they put in highly active or very active. And they're like, I'm only getting like 30% of all my nutrient recommendations. I'm like, that's because you put in something. Like, so let me describe what very or highly active means to this program. That means you're a construction worker that then goes, trains at the gym for 2 hours, then goes dancing all night. That's highly active. You might be intensely active during that 2 hour window of your team sport, 4 days a week or whatever, but that still may not qualify. So yeah, it's setting the bar too high for you. So yeah, you got to be real careful with this kind of stuff. What about supplements? Phil, do you take any supplements at all? I mean, you dabble with D or fish oils or something.
Yeah, I take vitamin D in the winter, some fish oils. I'll take creatine when I remember it. That's about it. Every once in a while I'll have a protein shake, blah, blah, blah. The multivitamin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to cover bases, but
yeah, omega-3s and vitamin D, those are things that people just don't, they get subpar intake, just kind of period. I'm the same way with the creatine, by the way. Like I'll put like a teaspoon in my coffee when I remember in the morning. Yeah, but it's just sort of a general muscle and nervous system health kind of thing.
Yep.
But D,
I need to get better at it.
Yeah, D, creatine. I do fish oils like you. Curcumin. I'll take some curcumin. I just keep hearing more and more stuff about it. Looks pretty valuable, especially with these wildly inflammatory viruses flying around. So that's not why I'm doing it, but it makes me glad that I do, and I've sort of bought into that. And we've talked about the value of that on the show before, why it might be having some effect and all that kind of stuff. But what else do I do? I'll take a C with some collagen and glucosamine chondroitin because my joints are ruined. They're just ruined. I'm not a big person, and I've abused my body a lot, so I'll do that before I go, exercise and stuff. What about supplementation for you, Mike? Are you trying to fill gaps that's not in the food, or are you just trying to hyper physiologically supplement? You know what I mean? Like, what are you after?
Yeah. So I go through periods of time of what I call and teach just expansion and contraction, right? So take a period of time, and if you want to try a bunch of new stuff, great. And then see what the result was. Did you think it made any difference? And then take a period of time and start pulling stuff away and see, did you really lose anything? Because a lot of times I'll see intake form of someone who's got like 21 different supplements, and it's like, man, you don't even know what's causing what or what's going on, and they've been on them for forever. They're like, oh, I spent so much money on this. It's like, well, let's just start taking a few away and see what happens. So since I've been at home and compliance is easier, like all the normal stuff, like you guys said, multivitamin. Sometimes I'll add a little bit more D. I don't add it that much in the summer, trying to get outside more now that we can actually get D from the sunlight almost in Minnesota, which is good.
Yep.
Creatine, fish oil. I'm running a little experiment where I've actually upped my amount of fish oil to see how that goes. So I'm going to probably do another blood test coming up. There's some interesting data that it may reduce resting heart rate, and there's some interesting data related to sudden cardiac death, cardiac risk if you're in the maybe 9% range if you look at blood levels, or RBC, maybe even a little bit higher. And also for my own curiosity, I think it's just going to plateau out, right? There's only so much you can probably pack into a red blood cell anyway, period. So doing that. And then I just started playing around a couple of weeks ago with a high amount of turmeric, ginger, kind of an anti-inflammatory compounds. I don't have a lot of weird niggly joint pain or anything odd like that. I was just more curious if I go super crazy with it for a period of time, does it help with recovery? Or I was also interested in sleep. So, just been doing that 3 weeks now. I can't say I've noticed anything hugely different with it. I do use some collagen, 15 grams, based on Keith Barr's stuff, usually before training. May help with soft tissue recovery. And then I'm just finishing up a company called Neurohacker. I use some of their stuff. They have a product called the Turnus, which is supposed to increase intracellular levels of NAD, NAD+, NADH, things of those pathways. I used it before, and my HRV and stuff actually went up pretty high and stayed there. So I thought I would try that again, and it seems to help. But again, it's, you're always like, well, you're doing more aerobic stuff, you're at home. But I figured for the time that I'm home, I'll just do the kitchen sink approach and throw everything in, see how it goes, and then slowly start pulling stuff out and see if it stays there or if it goes back down again. Because you're either left with do everything and see what happens, or you can try one thing at a time, but then it's going to take you like 8 years to figure anything out either. But you'd have a little bit more granularity of, what was the thing that kind of helped too. So
right.
I kind of do the kitchen sink approach for a while with, some thought as what I'm trying to elevate, what are my markers for looking at it, and then, pull it back out and see what stays.
Yeah. Deciding what variable you're going to actually monitor is kind of a big deal,
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it's just general, I feel like this, well, there's lots of reasons you can feel a certain way, Tell me about the NAD stuff. One more time, did you say you're taking NAD or just things that support that? Because I keep hearing in legitimate literature about NAD nutrition in the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So I spent about the past year trying to look at it as best I could. David Sinclair's book is really good for people who are interested in. So he does recommend there's NAD boosters you can take. There's basically just 2 of them. There's a big debate in the literature, at least in humans, if you try to sort of boost NAD directly, is that beneficial? So if you talk to Sinclair, he would say NMN is probably the best way to go. Other people would say no. You look at some of the literature, it appears to accumulate in the liver, so we don't know if it gets exported from there, and some of it's animal data and mechanistic data, and so it's all kind of across the board from what I've seen so far. The other downside is that the direct precursors are relatively expensive. They do appear to be absorbed orally. They don't appear to have any negative side effects that I've seen, although I don't know if I do an IV push of it. That makes me a little nervous. I know some people have done that.
Yeah.
So another product, which I'm an affiliate for through Neurohacker, is called the Turnus. So what they did is they took kind of a systems approach based on the literature and said, okay, all these other pathways, so things we want to upregulate, NAD, sirtuins, AMPK, things that are kind of in that longevity restoration pathway. And they use a mix of different compounds that are trying to upregulate multiple pathways without necessarily supplying a direct precursor, right? So if we kind of increase all these other pathways through a systems approach, do we kind of get to a better or possibly more sustainable effect? The downside is they're doing some preclinical work on it now, so there isn't a randomized controlled trial with the finished product. So you're kind of guessing and hedging your bets that, based on the literature, these things do have some benefit on each one of these different pathways. Doesn't guarantee if we throw them all in one supplement that we're going to see the effect that we expect to. But, again, I'm looking at what is the downside. All the compounds they use have generally been regarded as safe. I don't know of any negative effects from them per se, other than cost. It's kind of stupid expensive. But if you were to do, NAD precursors directly, that's pretty expensive also. So this is still cheaper than that. So I figured I would give it a shot again. And last time I did it, my HRV got like to the highest it's ever gotten, especially with travel and stress and everything else.
Interesting.
And then I removed it, and it stayed pretty high for quite a while. I didn't notice any effect until after about 4 to 6 weeks. So there's definitely more of a accumulation effect, which is what you would expect with a lot of supplements, and if you're upregulating different pathways at different time frames. So I figured I would give it a whirl again and see how it goes. And so far it seems to help, but again, you're doing multiple things at the same time too.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, AMPK, NAD, is it fair to characterize these things as basically just being ways to enhance cellular energy? That sounds so tacky, but I mean, NAD, NADH, right? If you're familiar, this is sort of energetically one of the main reasons for the Krebs cycle, is that you have more of this. And the idea that you could sort of just eat some or boost that system, that has some interesting, because I would have said the same thing about creatine 20 years ago. You can't just eat that stuff. Right? Yeah. So what do you think about, is that the idea to kind of backdoor your normal, food and calorie nutrient pathways and just get more NADH out of the show? Or is it more?
I mean, that's the basic principle. I mean, if you talk to Sinclair, he's real big on the idea of by boosting these compounds, we're kind of increasing and further clarifying the analogy he uses is kind of like the DNA has information there, but like a CD, it can kind of get scratched. And when you go to read it, you kind of reading out information that gets made into proteins and these other things that's not maybe correct. But if we kind of take something and we clean up the CD, and we kind of make the downstream, right? So the epigenetic response to that and the proteins that are made, we kind of clean that up, the information then is made better and more clear. So everything downstream that's made from that is better. And so his argument, is the way I understand it, is that NAD is one of those molecules that helps with that because you're increasing the cellular energy around that process.
Yep.
So then the debate is if that's true, which is highly controversial, and he's got some pretty good data to show that it's, his lab's been doing this for a long time, then can you just take a precursor supplement to it? Yeah, maybe. He'll take it with resveratrol at pretty high doses because resveratrol helps on the SIRT1 pathways again. In terms of human data, like I said, they're working on some, but not a lot yet. But some of the animal model stuff that they've done is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
I personally, I just still have my doubts that it's that simple that you could just take a precursor.
Right.
I want to believe that, but I don't know. But then I think of examples like you said of like creatine, where son of a bitch, it was that simple.
It was. The first time I heard of an NAD product was about 20 years ago, and I'm like, you guys are so full of shit. Because at that point they probably were. It's like the company they'll sell every single one of the 9 Krebs cycle metabolites and say this is why you need it. And you're like, sure, whatever. But now, it doesn't seem to go away, and you're seeing it in premier journals. And all right, I will keep an eye on it. I guess maybe it is. Yeah, maybe cross your fingers. It would be that simple because that would be pretty killer if it actually was biologically relevant, I guess.
Yeah. So we basically look at NMN as the one that Sinclair likes. The other one is nicotinamide riboside, right? Which is True Niagen. I think it's made by Chromadex, if I remember right. Those are the two ones that are kind of battling back and forth, I guess. And some of them have mixed data on both, I would say. I mean, if I were to guess right now, I would probably try NMN first, but I don't know. I may run that experiment at some point, but I just want to make sure I'm actually getting a legitimate source of it, and then obviously the expense.
Right.
Because anytime a supplement that has a lot of hype and has a high price point, there's going to be people that are just going to make crap and try to stick it in a bottle for a lot of money.
Yeah. I think I have sort of matured or mellowed my look at supplement. The way I view supplements over the years is early on, it was exciting. It was almost like pharma. It's like, oh, I could, do all these things. And, bodybuilders are always interested in manipulating hormones and all these different things and not shying away from things that look pharmaceutical. But more and more now, like with the D or the fish oils or a lot of the things, the collagen, it's just encapsulated food. In a lot of ways. I don't have some idea that this is some magical product. People that are very against supplements, they always act like they're somehow ergogenic aids on par with steroids or something. It's like they're just nutrients. It's like the vertical farming we were talking about before, or the cultured meats. It's just technology progressing in ways to get refined single nutrients. And some people don't like refined single, like standardized extract type things. They rather have the whole food source. But sometimes you can't do it that way. Creatine's a good example. You're not going to go eat 10 pounds of uncooked meat. Phil might. I don't know.
And then if you've been around the supplement industry on the inside long enough, you see how many different compounds have been tried and how many actually have. I mean, look at how long the supplement industry has been looking for the next creatine, from beta-alanine to citrulline malate to, some things that have some effect, but you're still talking single digits, even creatine, single digit effects, which
Ribose.
Definitely helpful.
Yeah.
But the amount of compounds that have been looked at that have no data or way less efficacious than that, if they even are efficacious, is the amount that make it through or is just so small that I think you tend to be, I know I tend to be very pessimistic, but I also try not to dismiss everything then either, because then you're on the other extreme of like, well, it's all just crap, nothing's worthwhile. It's like, no, we actually have some stuff that is beneficial in the single digit percentage, so you're back somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, Phil and you and I have all been around academics and we'll just say supplement industry folks enough to realize that, on the academic side, everybody's trying to disprove everything. Oh, that was biased. I was reading a review, like a systematic review of different meta-analyses. And, the risk of bias was high in every one of these studies. And, so, I mean, they become so negative and, they're just trying to disprove everything. And then on the supplement side, you're right. Everything is the next creatine, and they're full of crap, too. So, but the truth is, if you're actually a rational scientific thinker, you're just, you're not invested in one way or the other. You're just saying, well, let's see if this does anything. Let me bring this back to food a little bit here, Phil. What about kitchen skills? And I don't mean walk out into the barnyard and shoot a goat. but although that's something, honestly, I think a lot of young people, they actually need to witness that. Not in some gory way or, just the reality of where food comes from. It doesn't just appear from a food generator like Star Trek, under the plastic in the grocery store. But what about kitchen skills? Like the way you eat. What are some things you do in the kitchen? Now, before anybody, you guys are like, oh, Lonnie, come on, this is a lifting podcast and sports nutrition. But listen, if you don't have kitchen skills, you can't translate any of this stuff. So what are the kinds of things that you do on a more or less daily basis? Is it slow cooker? Is it pan fry stuff? What do you do?
God, I'd say the most often we got an air fryer. I've been using that a lot.
Oh,
but on a daily basis, I probably pan fire grill things the most. Just because it's fast.
Yeah.
Like I was making curry this week and stuff like that, and so we'll do that a lot. My wife will use the crock pot or whatever it is quite a bit, Instapot.
Yeah.
When it comes to me, I'm in there dicing things up and grilling things and stuff like that. I mean, aside from, like you said, taking goats apart and turning them into, into food. So, but I've done that my whole life. I mean, I was lucky in that, I was taught that at a young age, and it was like, you're going to learn how to cook. So,
right.
We're definitely not reliant on having to go out to eat. Do we go out to eat? Yes. But, there's not much that I'll at least won't try to cook. So. And
you and your wife are obviously both in the kitchen then. So I'm guessing lockdown hasn't been much of a problem for you, really.
No, it was weird because all of a sudden we wanted to go out to eat more just because we couldn't. So
forbidden fruit.
But no, I mean honestly, this lockdown didn't change us a lot. We're at home a lot anyways, so it hadn't changed. We got freezers full of stuff, so we're like, oh, we're good.
Right.
And that's why we kept our goats. I was getting ready to get rid of a lot of our goats, and then this all happened. I was like, I've got like 700 pounds of meat walking out there. I'm keeping it.
Walking. Right. Right. Well, and plus, I mean, if you know how to prepare it and it's delicious, that's different, right? If you don't know how, if you've got it at home walking around on your property, but you have no idea, you know, you have no kitchen skills, you're screwed. Yeah. You know, you're like, this is bland or tough or tasteless or whatever, or, you know, overly spiced. I blew it, you know, and then you can't enjoy it. But yeah, we're actually, Kelly and I are similar in that way, is we both cook. My son cooks. Yep. Everybody, we're pretty good at this. So I haven't really missed. I estimate that we were probably saving over $200 a month just not eating out.
I can see that.
You know,
I can see that easy.
And not really missing it. And it's kind of making me reassess, like, well, why were we doing that? Now, don't get me wrong. It's nice just to go, nobody has to cook, you know, if you're tired or you want to just go have some drinks with it or whatever.
To do and all that, yeah.
Yep. Mike, how would you rate your kitchen skills, and what do you do most regularly?
I'd say kitchen skills are pretty basic. We grow a lot, even all winter. We have one just out on the cement patio here, which works pretty good. We got a cast iron frying pan probably 3 years ago, and I'm actually surprised how much I use that. Mm-hmm. So we have so for like frying stuff, or sometimes if we take a steak, or my wife will bake a lot of vegetables and potatoes, actually. A tip we got from our friend Zoe when we were in Australia visiting Luke and at their wedding for Muscle Nerds was you boil potatoes ahead of time or just at the same time, and then kind of smash them down into a cast iron pan and then bake them in the oven. And for whatever reason, maybe it's just my own head, but they seem to taste even better. I'm not sure why that is, but so we do that a lot. And then we've got another stainless steel pan just to steam a lot of vegetables. So we'll buy like a whole bunch of organic green beans or broccoli, keep them in the freezer, and just heat some water and just dump them in and steam them. Just takes like a few minutes, so that's pretty fast. We use a Vitamix. We got that a couple of years ago to make a lot of super smoothies or even veggie shakes. Like we'll throw in a bunch of carrots and a bunch of spinach and a little bit of frozen pineapple, squeeze some lemons and limes, and something like that. So that's pretty easy to do. Or in the morning, we'll make a smoothie. Throw in, I do use some mushroom extracts also, some cacao powder. Usually in the morning, if my wife is having it, we'll throw in some rice protein, like 40 grams for each of us. And so that works pretty good. Mm-hmm. So it's all, nothing crazy, pretty basic, but I think you can get by with some basic skills and make food that's still pretty tasty without getting crazy. The only other thing different I've been doing lately is I call it my little steak quest. So I've been playing around with different ways of making steak for a couple of years now. So I've did a little bit more with the sous vide, which is pretty cool. Like you can cook stuff. Like I like it for chicken and pork and things of that nature. It's basically just a controlled hot water bath. You can control it super, I would say correct, but precise. The hard part with the steak is just getting it dry enough on the outside again and getting the grill hot enough to get it to really sear. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing I've been working on now. Mm-hmm. A buddy of mine has like literally what looks like an industrial blowtorch he uses, but wow. I don't have one of those yet.
Fancy, yeah, I get it. Yeah, sometimes you'll see chefs, like legit chefs, using little blowtorches to get something just the right, scorchy color.
Yeah, this looks more like an industrial flamethrower.
Not so fancy, not pinky extending kind of equipment.
No, not for the creme brulee. This is pretty industrial looking.
That's funny. I think that's a real tip. I think for listeners is that because same with me. I mean, between the Instapot and a crock pot. I mean, go Google crock pot recipes. You're going to be amazed. I've even seen Kelly's made different kind of like cake in there and stuff, but between the like a crock pot kind of setup and just a hot frying pan, you can get a lot done. I mean, partly nuking stuff in advance, like you said, like I just did that just yesterday with some potatoes, so you're not standing there forever, or nuke some broccoli or something, get it softened before you throw it in. But microwave, crock pot, and a pan. I wish I could make the cast iron pan work for me and be they say if you season it well, with oils and whatnot, it's and the older it gets, the better, and just sort of non-stick surface. And because sometimes I'm worried about the Teflon weird, I don't even know what they're made from, surfaces. And then I tried ceramic for a while, and then I read there's different molecules given off from that if you make it too hot. And so I don't know. To me, it's always just lesser of different evils, I guess. If I can't make it so it doesn't stick to the pan, then I don't know. But yeah, I think just fry a lot of stuff. I do that. We cook a lot of chicken breasts still, lean meats, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
one other thing that has been useful that was really cheap, I got it maybe 4 years ago now, was it's probably only like a 4-cup thing, white rice cooker from Amazon for like $34. It's got a stainless steel container and everything, and I debated buying it forever, and I realized, well, I don't make that much white rice. If I do, I would make like a whole ton of it. And I'm like, well, maybe it'll just be a convenience thing. And what I found was oh, wow, this is great. I can, put it in there, turn it on, go lift, and I have some chicken breast that was already, grilled before in the fridge, so I just have to add it to the cast iron pan, and the rice will cook on its own and turn off and stay warm. I don't have to stand there and watch it the whole time. It's like, oh, wow, this sounds like really like stupidly obvious, but I'm like, this actually is very useful and saves me a ton of time.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to try something to be like, to really appreciate, like, hey, that was solid gold, man. Yeah, I didn't mention the one thing I boil all the time. I don't eat as much pasta as I used to. I used to live on large amounts, but is my oatmeal. I mean, I use the same pot, and I can actually tell. I don't even have to measure anything anymore. And I use a wooden spoon in a pot, and I know exactly how much water. I fill it up a certain depth. And when I stir it, I can feel the oatmeal drag, the raw oats that I dump in, drag through the water at just a certain resistance. I'm like, that's right. And that's my bragging kitchen skill is I can tell by, pancake batter is sometimes like that too, because I use carbs like oatmeal or sometimes pancakes. Like Phil once said, carbs are a great vehicle to get other stuff into your mouth, and those get the fruits into my mouth, right? So, I'm pretty proficient with that. I know just how long enough to let the fiber powder sit in my pancake batter. It's going to thicken it up just so, egg whites make your pancakes really tall. Everybody, not whole eggs. You just use a little bit of egg white. Little tips like that you just pick up, I guess.
Fluffy, yeah.
Fluffy, damn right.
Fluffy.
Yeah, too many biscuits will make you fluffy. All right. Well, I think that's sort of a whirlwind tour of, ways to look at your diet, characterize your diet, and stuff like that. So that'll be it for this week, and I guess we'll catch up with everybody next time.
Sweet. See you later.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the store, so we try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.